July 23, 1983. 41,000 feet over Manitoba. Both engines flame out. No alarms. Just silence. This is Wings and Wrecks. How machines fail, and what saves the people inside them. The answer lies in a chain of small failures, a fuel gauge that was dark, and a manual calculation that went wrong. Why did nobody stop it? The 767 was new, but its fuel gauge was broken. With the gauge dark, the pilots were blind. They had to measure fuel by hand. A dripstick measurement is only as good as the math that follows it. What could go wrong with a simple multiplication? They multiplied by 1.77 liters per pound, a factor meant for a different fuel. The crew believed they had 20,400 kilograms. They had half that. How could a single number hide the truth? Here is the trap. A single number, off by a factor of 2. And so the 767 lifted off, its tanks holding barely enough fuel to reach the halfway point. Why did nobody stop it? The systems designed to catch such an error were silently undone. The first safeguard was the fuel gauge, inoperative. The second was the manual calculation, wrong factor. The third was the fuel load check. Numbers seemed plausible. Every number the crew saw was internally consistent. The system trusted the math, and the math was wrong. The investigation concluded, not a mechanical failure, but a failure of communication and understanding. What does it feel like when silence is the alarm? At 41,000 feet, the silence was absolute. Both engines flamed out. The only sound was the wind over the wings. But the silence was not the end. It was the beginning of a 17-minute glide covering 50 nautical miles. Captain Pearson's voice was calm, but the words were stark. We have a fuel problem. First Officer Quintal spotted the old RCAF base at Gimli. The runway had become a drag strip, and a car race was underway. The landing was rough. The nose gear collapsed, and the 767 skidded to a stop. But all 69 people walked away. Why did no one catch it? The answer lies not in the cockpit, but in the systems that were supposed to protect the crew. Every safeguard was in place, yet each was defeated by a single, silent error. The fix was a new way of thinking. Airlines rewrote fuel manuals, standardized to metric, and made pilots verify conversions aloud. But the deeper change was human. The most dangerous error is the one that looks correct. The silence in the cockpit was deafening. No engine hum, no alarms, just the rush of air. Captain Pearson and First Officer Quintal exchanged glances. They had trained for emergencies, but nothing prepared them for this. The aircraft was now a glider, and every second mattered. But Pearson had a secret weapon. He was a glider pilot. His hobby had taught him how to fly without engines. He knew how to stretch altitude and manage energy. That experience would become the difference between life and death for everyone on board. Why did the gauge fail? The fuel quantity indicator had failed because of a faulty capacitance probe. It was a small electronic component, but its failure set off a chain of events. The crew never knew the gauge was broken. They assumed it was just a minor glitch. With the gauge dark, the crew had to use a dripstick, a long rod inserted into the tank to measure fuel depth. It was a tedious process, but it was the only way. The reading gave them a volume, but they needed weight. That's where the trouble began. The conversion factor for jet fuel is 0.8 kilograms per liter, but the crew used 1.77, a factor meant for a different fuel type. It was a simple mistake, but it doubled the fuel load in their calculations. They thought they had plenty. They had almost none. The calculated fuel load of 20,400 kilograms seemed plausible. It fit the expected range for the flight. No one questioned it, because it looked right. But it was off by a factor of 2. The system trusted the number, and the number was wrong. About halfway through the flight, a low fuel warning light flickered on. The crew checked their calculations. They had enough fuel. They dismissed it as a sensor glitch. But the warning was real. The fuel was running out faster than they thought. Then it happened. The left engine flamed out, then the right. The silence was sudden and absolute. The aircraft began to lose altitude. Pearson took control, his mind racing through the options. They had to find a place to land, fast. Pearson immediately put the aircraft into a glide. He knew that a 767 has a glide ratio of about 12:1. For every 12 feet forward, it loses 1 foot of altitude. That gave them about 17 minutes of flying time. They had to make every second count. Quintal scanned the ground for a suitable landing site. Then he spotted it, the old RCAF base at Gimli. It had a long runway, but it was now a drag strip. A car race was in progress. They had no choice. They had to land there. Pearson executed a side slip to lose altitude quickly. The 767 touched down hard. The nose gear collapsed, and the aircraft skidded down the runway, sparks flying. It came to a stop near the crowd. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. The aircraft was damaged but repairable. It was eventually fixed and returned to service, flying for Air Canada for another 25 years. The Gimli Glider became a legend, but it also became a lesson. The aircraft's survival was a testament to the crew's skill. The incident led to changes in fuel measurement procedures and increased awareness of unit conversion errors. Airlines adopted standardized metric measurements and made pilots verify conversions aloud. The Gimli Glider is now a cornerstone of human factors training, a reminder that even the most experienced can err. But the dripstick itself wasn't the problem. It was the math that followed. The crew measured the fuel depth, got a volume in liters, and then had to convert it to kilograms. That conversion required a density factor, and here's where the error crept in. They used 1.77, but the correct density for jet fuel is 0.8. That single wrong number doubled their fuel estimate, and nobody noticed because it looked so plausible. But the warning light wasn't a glitch. It was the truth. The crew had been flying for hours, and the fuel was draining faster than they thought. When the low fuel light flickered on, they checked their calculations. Again, the numbers seemed fine, so they dismissed it as a sensor error. That dismissal cost them precious minutes they would desperately need later. So when the engines flamed out, Pearson had an unexpected advantage: his hobby. He was a licensed glider pilot, and that experience taught him how to fly without power. He knew how to manage energy, how to stretch a glide, and how to make every foot of altitude count. That knowledge, honed on weekends, became the difference between a miracle and a catastrophe. And those 17 minutes were a masterclass in energy management. The 767 has a glide ratio of about 12:1, meaning it can travel 12 feet forward for every foot of altitude lost. From 41,000 feet, that gave them roughly 50 nautical miles of glide range. Pearson had to use that range wisely, picking the right speed and the right path to reach a landing site. But then came the landing spot. Gimli was a former airbase, but its runway had been converted into a drag strip. And on that day, a car race was in full swing. The crew had to land on a runway that was now a racetrack, with spectators and vehicles scattered around. It was a target that was both a lifeline and a hazard. Pearson needed to lose altitude fast, so he used a side slip, a maneuver where the aircraft is intentionally banked and yawed to increase drag. It's risky in an airliner, but it worked. The 767 touched down hard, the nose gear collapsed, and the aircraft skidded down the runway, sparks flying. It stopped just short of the crowd. All 69 people walked away, a testament to Pearson's skill and nerve. Could it happen today? The numbers are safer now, but the real warning is about quiet assumptions. What near miss do you think is still out there? Every failure leaves a lesson. Subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. Our next video.